The next HOA letter arrived, this time thicker than usual. It included a running total of the fines, $1,200 in climbing. The board's tone had shifted from passive-aggressive to openly threatening. If the balance wasn't paid, they warned, they could place a lien on his home. What the board didn't realize was that every letter they sent was ammunition, evidence piling up for the case his brother was quietly building. The homeowner didn't respond, didn't pay, didn't even acknowledge the threats. Instead, he followed his brother's advice: keep every letter, date every envelope, and document the driveway daily with photographs. Within 2 weeks, his brother had compiled a thick folder. It contained the HOA's bylaws, copies of all correspondence, and a timeline that showed exactly how the fines had spiraled out of control. According to the documents, the HOA's authority was clear. They could issue warnings and modest fines for repeat violations, but nothing remotely close to $100 a day. What they were doing wasn't enforcement, it was extortion. The homeowner's brother drafted a formal letter of his own, carefully worded and backed with citation from state law. It declared the fines unlawful, demanded an immediate stop to all charges, and threatened legal action if the harassment continued. The letter was sent by certified mail, with a return receipt that left no room for denial. When the HOA board received it, panic began to set in. They had expected their target to fold quickly under pressure. Instead, they found themselves confronted with a letter from an attorney who clearly knew what he was talking about. The language was precise, confident, and intimidating in a way their boilerplate threats could never match. At the next board meeting, tensions boiled over. Some members insisted they double down, while others worried about liability. Word spread quickly among neighbors that the board might have overplayed its hand. Rumors of lawsuits made even the most loyal HOA supporters uneasy. The homeowner, meanwhile, remained calm. He went about his days as usual, mowing his lawn and waving to neighbors who gave him discreet nods of approval. He knew appearances mattered. While the board was busy unraveling, he presented himself as nothing more than a responsible, level-headed resident being unfairly targeted. It was a sharp contrast to the HOA's bullying tactics, and people noticed. Behind the scenes, his brother prepared the next step. If the HOA refused to back down, they would file suit. Not only would they seek to have the fines dismissed, but they would also demand damages for harassment, emotional distress, and legal fees. The board members, many of whom had never been challenged before, were about to find themselves dragged into a fight they couldn't afford. And just when the HOA thought things couldn't get worse, the homeowner's brother found something buried deep in the bylaws, something that would turn the entire case upside down. The board's power wasn't as absolute as they liked to pretend. In fact, a single overlook clause threatened to dismantle their entire enforcement strategy. The overlook clause was small, hidden in legal jargon near the end of the HOA's bylaws, but its meaning was enormous. It stated that all fines and enforcement actions required approval by a majority vote of the homeowners, not just the board. The clause had been written years earlier, buried so deep in the rules that no one on the current board even remembered it existed. In other words, the $100 a day fine had never been valid. It wasn't backed by a community vote, which meant the board had been threatening liens and legal action with no authority at all. What they had done was not only excessive but outright illegal. The attorney wasted no time. He drafted a second letter, even stronger than the first, laying out the violation in plain terms. It demanded that all fines be dropped immediately, that a formal written apology be issued, and that the HOA cover the homeowner's legal expenses. If they refused, the matter would move directly to court, where the board members themselves could be held personally liable. When the HOA board received the letter, their arrogance evaporated. Whispers spread through the neighborhood as board members scrambled to contain the fallout. Meetings grew heated, with neighbors demanding answers and accountability. The once feared board was suddenly fractured, its members arguing among themselves about who had approved the fines in the first place. The homeowner, meanwhile, remained steady. He never raised his voice, never made threats, never gloated. He let the process play out, confident that the truth was now on his side. Neighbors who once kept their distance began stopping by his yard to chat, quietly voicing support and sharing their own frustrations with the HOA. The board's reputation was unraveling in real time. Within weeks, the HOA caved. The fines were officially rescinded, The lien threat withdrawn, and a carefully worded letter of apology was delivered to his mailbox. More importantly, the board agreed to cover his legal fees, a quiet admission that they had been caught red-handed. The victory was sweet, but what followed was even sweeter. Emboldened by his stand, other homeowners began speaking up about their own grievances. The stain on the driveway had sparked something larger, a collective realization that the HOA was not untouchable. Petty rules and bullying tactics were questioned, and by the next annual election, several board members were voted out entirely. For the homeowner, the outcome was more than just personal vindication. It was proof that standing up to unfairness mattered, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. The HOA had tried to break him with crushing fines, but instead, they had been forced to admit defeat and face the consequences of their overreach. The driveway stain remained, faint and harmless as ever. To him, it wasn't a blemish, it was a badge of victory, a reminder that sometimes the smallest things can spark the biggest battles. The HOA had fined him $100 a day, certain he would fold. Instead, he outsmarted them, and in doing so, he taught the entire neighborhood a lesson about power, respect, and the strength of standing your ground. Do like, subscribe for more story. The letter came on an ordinary Tuesday, tucked into the homeowner's mailbox between bills and grocery store flyers. At first glance, it looked like routine correspondence from the HOA, a reminder about dues or perhaps an update about landscaping. But when he opened it, his stomach tightened. It wasn't a notice. It was a fine. The letter claimed he was in violation of the HOA's rules. The issue? A small, barely noticeable patch of discoloration on his driveway. To the board, this cosmetic imperfection was unacceptable, and until it was repaired to community standards, he would be fined $100 per day. Shock quickly turned to anger. The driveway had a minor oil stain, nothing unusual for a home where cars were parked daily. He kept his property immaculate otherwise. His grass was trimmed, his hedges shaped, his exterior paint fresh. Yet somehow, this tiny stain had become the HOA's weapon of choice. At $100 a day, the fine wasn't just punitive, it was crushing. If left unchecked, it could snowball into thousands of dollars in weeks. He reread the letter, searching for a loophole, but the language was clear and smug, almost taunting. The board was daring him to fight back, betting he would fold under the pressure. It wasn't about the driveway. It was about control. They wanted to remind him who really ran the neighborhood. For the first few days, he considered complying. He priced out power washing services and even thought about replacing part of concrete. But the more he thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. Why should he spend thousands to fix something that didn't matter? Why should he let them bully him over a technicality? The fine wasn't just unfair, it was outrageous. As the days ticked by, the letters continued. Each new envelope carried the same message, pay or else. His neighbors began whispering, some sympathetic, others amused. The HOA seemed confident, convinced they had cornered him into submission. But what they didn't realize was that he wasn't alone in this fight. He had a powerful ally, one the board had severely underestimated. His younger brother was an attorney, specializing in property and contract law. And when he explained the situation to him over dinner one night, the attorney's reaction was immediate. He didn't laugh, didn't scoff, didn't shrug it off. He leaned forward, eyes sharp, and told him the HOA had just made a serious mistake. The fine, as it turned out, wasn't just unreasonable, it was unlawful. The board had overstepped, using vague language to impose penalties that far exceeded what the bylaws actually allowed. They had crossed the line, and now they were vulnerable. With his brother's guidance, the homeowners shifted from panic to resolve. The HOA thought they were squeezing him, but in reality, they had opened themselves up to a fight they weren't prepared for. The first counterstrike was already being planned, and soon the board would realize they had picked a battle with the wrong neighbor.